All these games are starting to blur together into an unpleasant oleaginous mass, and it's ruining the damn carpet. And yet, because the controls are so limited, this game constantly screws you over. If I were to go through and make a list of all the things that this game adds to the series, I'd basically come up blank. There's no joke here, I'm just really tired. Mega Man 9 came out worldwide for digital download in late 2008, 10 years after the initial release of Mega Man in base in Japan. The name is a bit misleading because it's actually the 10th main series classic Mega Man game, however it's far from the 10th overall Mega Man game. While Capcom were decently reserved in the 80s and 90s with Mega Man, in the 2000s they went crazy with Mega Man and released game after game after game. By the time they got to 2008, they had driven the series into the ground and had to basically go back to square one to try and see what worked. Also, around this time we had the rise of influencers and content creators in the early days of YouTube and various other websites. The common consensus at the time to those in power seemed to be that Mega Man was at its best during the early days of the franchise, as in Mega Man 2 era early days. So after spin-off after spin-off after spin-off and sequel after sequel after sequel, none of which really sold all that well, Capcom decided to go back to its roots and create a tribute to the series' 8-bit origins, basically by making a game in the style of the 8-bit games, wonky cover art and all. It seemed to be a self-aware blast from the past and a last-ditch effort to try and give the fans what they wanted, or rather give the fans what they thought they wanted. Let me tell you a secret, alright? I hate franchises that feel they have to move backwards because oftentimes there's a good reason for them to move forwards in the first place. Usually because the march of time will allow the series to become better organically through better technology. 95% of the time, the desire to move backwards is done because of nostalgia blinding your own perception rather than anything objective. On top of that, in my experiences, fans don't know what they want. All they know is that they want more of it. Seeing the franchise move backwards all the way back to the 80s was an alarm bell by itself, but then you combine that with the fact that it was brought on by Capcom listening to a bunch of people who had a skewed perspective because they grew up in the early days of the series, and the end result was that I did not like where the series was going from the very concept alone, and the game itself, well, let's just say it didn't do much to assuage my gut feeling. In fact, it only confirmed it. Ah yes, Mega Man 9, the one that was heralded as an all-time great when it came out, and a true return to form. A return to when the series wasn't as good, and it couldn't even do that right. Yay! So obviously the first thing to address here is the art style. After a whole crap ton of games, they went back to the style of an NES game, so Mega Man fell off the wagon after 3 games and went back to its comfort zone. Then by the next game it would overdose and Mega Man would go into a coma for another 10 years. But more on that later. They went to some lengths to recreate the NES art style for better or worse, and for what it is, they did quite well. It's authentic to a fault. There's even an option to activate sprite flicker if you really want that authentic look, if you've recently taken a railroad spike to the head and can't see how things have improved over the past 20 years between the time of the first Mega Man game's release and this game was released. There are a number of options that this game has to improve or take away the level of authenticity, like if you want to play on a tiny screen in the middle of the TV, have at it. It should be noted that this game isn't actually in the resolution of an NES game, it's an HD game manipulated to look like the resolution of an NES game. As that's the case, there are some inaccuracies if you look close enough. For example, you may notice that the scaling on some of the sprites are inaccurate. There'll be some stretching here and there, which can look ugly if you're one for looking at the fine details, and overall, even by 8-bit standards, this game looks somehow flatter than an NES game. I'll admit, the sprite work is good, the backgrounds are nice, the animations are accurate for the time, the determination to make this game look authentic is admirable in the same way that it's admirable to survive a shattered skull. At the end of the day, this entire art style can't help but feel inherently regressive. We'd moved past this. I like the NES because it was my first console, but I'm fully aware that the entire system is an acquired taste, so this game specifically is meant to target those nostalgic feelings rather than be good in its own right, and that feels cynical when the series already moved past this. I found the art style of Mega Man 8 to be top-notch, so to have it go back to the table scraps just for throwback's sake feels wrong. If it's a deliberate flashback game like Shovel Knight, then it's fine to authentically recreate the way things used to look with your own spin, but this is just deliberately, and might I add cynically, going backwards because they think that's what people want. Lest we forget though, Shovel Knight was a superb game and Mega Man 9 isn't, and it could have easily been a great game because the art style doesn't really account for much in the grand scheme of things, but the art style represents the biggest issue that kills Mega Man 9 for me. It's so fucking pleased with itself for recreating an NES style that it completely butchers itself and everything good the series had going for it for the sake of authenticity. So the plot this time around is that a bunch of robots mysteriously go nuts and start attacking. Hey, it's Chun-Li. Cool. For whatever reason, instead of deciding to do the obvious thing and immediately arrest Dr. Wily, who had just been stopped in an unspecified prologue that could have been the ending to any game, they decide that because it was Dr. Light's robots who started attacking, that Dr. Light must obviously be behind this. Yeah, it's not like robots can have some sort of behavioral changes. Yeah, you can't reprogram robots, apparently. So everybody takes Dr. Wily's word for it that he's not involved. Dr. Light is arrested, and you spend the rest of the game trying to prove Dr. Light's innocence by laying the smack down on 8 robot masters, etc, etc, etc. So we've managed to travel 1,000 miles and end up right the fuck back where we started. I don't know, obviously because this game is trying to act self-aware, we're not supposed to take any of this seriously. It's flying the irony banner high enough to get caught on a biplane's propeller, but I'd say that the self-awareness excuse only goes so far when basic sense goes out the window, like how this game tries to go for a half-hearted tribute type thing with how it presents the interactions with all these characters, and yet constantly feels like it's ashamed of everything in the past because it's so selective about what it acknowledges. Plus, every character acts like an absolute idiot, but whatever, that's not why we're here, of course. These are things that could have been irony stapled on top of a great game, but instead it's an overly pleased cock slapping me across the face while saying, "Weren't the 80s great? This game sucks." And it sucks for some really dumb reasons. And it comes right down to one thing. Let me explain something. The early Mega Man games were what they were and nothing more. What they were trying to do is create games as good as possible using the technology and controls available. They weren't trying to be anything more than good games with whatever they had at their disposal. The problem is, Mega Man 9, instead of trying to be a good game in its own right, tries to ape games on the NES, but completely misunderstands what made them, I hesitate to use the word good, or made them what they were. However, in trying to make a game in the style of Mega Man 2, they grabbed onto the wrong stick and thought, oh, they like Mega Man 2 because it's really hard, let's make it like that, and as a result made a game that was so deliberately and obliviously obnoxious, thinking that's how it's done. The primary thing they've done is that they've rolled back the game's controls to the level of Mega Man 2. So no slide, no Mega Buster, no beat, no different armor sets, it's all gone in favor of going back to the most bare bones of bare bones mechanics. It's regressed back to Mega Man 2 because at the time it was the popular opinion that anything after Mega Man 2 wasn't worth a damn. Here's the issue. I don't even like Mega Man 2 all that much. It was a subpar game as far as the series is concerned through no fault of its own, but the issue between these two games is that Mega Man 2 was more or less built around the mechanics at hand. There weren't any hazards in that game that you couldn't theoretically bypass. Mega Man 9 has hazards all around you that are built for a game with more fluid controls, and yet because the controls are so limited, this game constantly screws you over. The biggest example was in Jewel Man's level. There's this mini-boss with these falling rocks, but the time between the rocks appearing and hitting the ground is such a slim time, and there's way too many rocks coming way too fast for you to know which way is the optimal way to go. You know what would have been great in a situation like this where things are falling too fast for me to dodge? I don't know, some sort of on-command temporary speed boost, like a slide. Yeah, they built this fight to be optimized for Mega Man 3 or Mega Man 4 controls, then gives you Mega Man 2 controls. Fuck Dr. Wily, this was the hardest part of the game, and for all intents and purposes, it's right at the beginning of the game. What, you guys wanted it to be hard? No, I wanted it to be good. This isn't the satisfying type of hard, it's just balls. It's blatantly unfair and horrible game design. Like, fuck this entire mini-boss and fuck most of the other mini-bosses, but this one in particular. There are sections where you run past a thing that looks like TV static, then you end up being chased by a version of yourself that's slightly faster than you. If only you had a way to get away from them in a pinch, but no, you have to make sure to deal with them before you do anything else, because if they get on top of you, you're fucked. But let me be clear here. Mega Man 9's obsession with giving you hazards built for later games with the controls of Mega Man 2 isn't the only issue, because that's just inept design. Actively malicious design is a whole other kettle of fish. You know what I can't stand in game design? Things that just kill you and you have no way to see them coming, and Mega Man 9 loves these types of hazards. The worst of it is in Galaxy Man stage, where you have a whole bunch of hazards along the periphery of your view, each that are easy enough to avoid, and in fact some of them are so far out of your view that you don't even know they're there until you're being pushed into them, because apropos of nothing, these things fall from on high and grab you, then push you into hazards with no way for you to fight out of it.
Keska fucking kidding me?
Look at that! How the hell am I supposed to prepare for that? How am I supposed to know about that before I was already grabbed and thrown into spikes? And you're given basically less than a second to react, and if you don't catch it and don't react correctly, fuck you, you're dead. This seems like something someone would put in as a joke. This is a hazard that appears several times throughout the game, and it never gets better. Then you have the section in Plugman stage where they bring back the disappearing blocks with a vengeance. The entire stage is horribly designed around the disappearing blocks, but this one section is the worst of it. These disappearing blocks were never good, but when you take them already as bad as they are and have it so that by the default design you're forced to take leap of faith jumps, that's bullshit. Look at this moment. The block below doesn't appear until the first block is already gone, so there's no way to know where to stand to land on the platform. platform. The stage is full of moments like this. Then there are these red and blue spinning platforms, which are a fine enough idea if it weren't for the fact that everything around you is designed to kill you, and if that doesn't kill you, it's suspended over a bottomless pit. Even worse, we have the technology these days that you can have things that aren't on screen still exist, but these platforms don't exist until they're on screen, and so there's a chance that they might appear out of a decent rhythm, so you can't properly jump from platform to platform. It's awful. I also need to stress here that I'm trying to limit my exact amount of anecdotes and specific examples, because if I were to go over every example available to me of really terrible design, we'd be here all day, because there's something in every level that pisses me off. The ink and the horrible water-based gimmicks in the water stage, goddamn everything about Jewel Man stage, the nearly invincible enemies in Magma Man stage. Every step I take, something's pissing on my shoes. And then there's just the general dickish game design. Like, there are these swings in Jewel Man stage where you have to run back and forth to gain momentum, but then the spot you have to land on is one square of floor large, and everything around it is instant death spikes. If you're off by a centimeter, you're fucking dead. But you're also at the whims of a momentum swing, so precision is out the window because there's too many elements at play. So I died and died and died. This is ROM hack levels of unfair level design, and this isn't even the last hazard before the checkpoint. This is before that aforementioned bullshit mini-boss. Nor is this the last one of these swings. These swings are everywhere in this level and are always coinciding with fucking spikes and pits that kill you after one mistake. You have to make these pixel-perfect jumps because if you're 1 pixel above the height of the platform, oop, you're dead. I'm just lucky enough I had the weapon that could get me past this. Or how about Hornet Man stage, where you have to shoot these platforms to extend them, but they only extend for like a second. Then there are these enemies coming from all over the place, and surprise, surprise, if you fall into the spikes. Seriously, what is it with all the spikes in this game? Almost everywhere I look, spikes, 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 bottomless pits, spikes, spikes. Everything is out to kill you unfairly. Like, the only time I remember any of these games being this out to kill me was in the second game in Quickman stage with the lasers. The entirety of Mega Man 9 is like the opening to Quickman stage. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration because there are these sections where you're doing some basic platforming, usually when they're introducing a mechanic, but then you're at the whims of the annoying enemies, like the ones that explode and turn into several smaller enemies, or the minecart enemies that explode into several pellets when you kill them, or the scissors that split off, or the annoying mines that chase you like they're magnetic. Sad thing is, there are some really good ideas here and there, like the platforms that come out of the wall, but the platforms themselves have health bars indicated by the amount of fluid in the platform, and that's used to some really fun effects with good platforming. Concrete Man stage has some fun but basic platforming moments that take advantage of the mechanics quite well, but even then, when I say these levels take advantage of the mechanics quite well, even that has to come with a severe asterisk, because the mechanics are so bare bones that there's very little that you can do with the basic setup. You jump and shoot, and there's basically nothing you can do other than that. It's not that you couldn't have made a good game with that, but at the same time, there's far less you can do with this mechanical setup. But as a result, they try and slip some copied ideas from earlier games under the radar. So when this game's not terrible or bland, it's just a blatant ripoff. There's this one section in the now mandatory water stage that's just the bubble section from Mega Man 6. Ah shit, that wasn't Mega Man 6, was it? It was Mega Man 5. Wow, these games are really all starting to blur together. Or how about the whole Magma Man stage where you can use concrete to freeze fire, which is basically like something out of Mega Man 1. All these games are starting to blur together into an unpleasant oleaginous mass, and it's ruining the damn carpet. As for the bosses, this time around we have Galaxy Man, Jewel Man, Plug Man,
More like Butt Plug Man,
Tornado Man, Magma Man, Concrete Man, Hornet Man, and Splash Woman. Woman?
It broke new ground!
It only took them 10 games in this canon, although I do know that other Mega Man series did have female bosses, all characterized by what can only be described as waifu eyes. Although that does bring up a good point. What even is the advantage of having gendered robots? That seems kind of counterintuitive. Wouldn't it be better for robots to be, like, gender neutral? I don't know. The bosses are a mixed bag, but in other news, this guy continues to be blue. Galaxy Man can die in a fire because his primary attack sucks. Well, okay. Literally, it sucks, because it sucks you in slightly slower than you can run, but that leaves you completely open. It would be nice if I had a quick way to get away, wouldn't it? You have some piss-easy ones like Jewel Man, who's just a chump with the black hole bomb, so much so it's not even worth talking about. Oh hey, an achievement. I totally care about that. Butt Plug Man just stands there and leaves himself open. I think the best boss in this game would probably be Splash Woman, so Keiji Inafune must have internalized something. She moves all over the arena and spawns a bunch of enemies, which gives you a chance to utilize the water-based high jump. The weapons, on the other hand, are surprisingly solid. However, I didn't know that until after the fact. I was watching a long play just to reacquaint myself with this game, and the Laser Trident in particular is one of the most overpowered weapons in the game, and even then, the variety and usage is probably some of the best in the history of the series. Three-way shots, shields, big AoE attacks that suck everything around you in. They have some really good selection, and possibly the best selection out of at least 90% of the series, but it's not like they can make the absolutely abhorrent mini-bosses any better, because these mini-bosses, you know what? Never mind. This game doesn't deserve it. I don't know, at this point it's practically instinctual for me to just use the regular blaster, but now that they've taken away the Mega Buster, this game is basically trying to tell me I should start experimenting again, but honestly, I'm still just wanting to use what works, which is why I'm still looking up the boss order for the most optimized boss order. Especially seeing as this game was dicking me over from the beginning, so there's no reason I shouldn't dick it over right back. Is there anything I liked about this game? Well, all things considered, it's become almost Pavlovian to say that the soundtracks to these games are great, but this one in particular stood out. They really have a knack for excellent chiptune music, and with the benefit of hindsight, they really made the most of this modern take on classic music. I don't know, if I were to go through and make a list of all the things that this game adds to the series, I'd basically come up blank, and if I were to make a list of features it takes away, I'd have a list longer than my list of people to kill. They did bring back E-tanks, they didn't kill off the shop, there's a few items to buy and most of them are useful, plus the currency is still a regular pickup for what it's worth, though if you don't spend at least some of your screws on the item replicator, then you'll miss out on a major advantage because of the surprisingly good weapon selection. But there's not really anything else worth buying beyond that, and the most expensive item in the game is a cosmetic. I'm not even gonna say what it is because I find that so insulting. This game does some good things, but in the end I always come back to all the times I felt like packing it in because Mega Man 9 is not fun to play. The most blatant thing they repeat in the entire game is the entire ending sequence, which is exactly like the past I don't know how many games. So in the end we get a brief cutscene where we see security footage of Dr. Wily talking to all the bosses. Turns out that they were all set to be destroyed because they were obsolete. They were content with this, but Dr. Wily convinces them that they can still be of use as long as they're functional.
You know, not to side with Virtual Hitler, but he has got a good point.
But it was all a ruse, and Wily gives them upgrades to make them useful, but were totally what made them go crazy.
No shit, plot twist. Ho! Seriously, for the love of God, stop trying to convince us that Wily isn't going to be the main villain in any of these games, okay? Because it just makes every single person in this game's universe look sub-functional. Like, there are definitely meaner ways to put that, but I'm not allowed to say that anymore.
Wily steals the evidence, and so you have to make your way through his castle to try and steal back the evidence and clear Dr. Light's name, and this portion of the game could be considered the absolute worst part because it's where any semblance of fairness goes out the window. Hazards you don't have any means to defend yourself from. Yep. Things that will just kill you without warning and no way to predict. Yep. General unfair design and gimmicks. Yep. Hazards that just pop out of nowhere. Yep. I gave it a chance and found that there was some good, albeit simple level design in places. Jump over a thing and shoot some things. Nothing you haven't seen before, but it does the job just fine. At least it's not a very long castle section, because they're still at the point where they feel they only really need to have one castle. I don't know, it's really hard to talk about this section of the game, because it's basically the same as everything up to this point, only worse for having all the bad compacted, and it's more repetitious for repeating most of the set pieces and enemies from throughout the game, mixed in with a few interesting ideas.
Are you shitting me? Are you shitting me? Like, how am I supposed to predict that? In what way is that fair? The game just flat out kills me, cause fuck me, right? Just kills me. Yeah. Fun design, great design, fucking classic design. Fuck this game.
Moving on. Boss-wise, there's actually a few interesting spins on the formula, like how there's this four-way tug-of-war where you need to push these balls into the bosses twice, and they can only attack you once they get the balls to your side. It's a hectic struggle, but it's the type of boss that gets easier as it goes on, and you deal with more of these guys. By the time you're down to 2 or 1, it's a walk in the park. Then you have to fight a 3-part boss, which is a giant shark ship. Huh. And each section has a different weakness. It's a fun spin on the traditional boss fight and kind of reminds me of taking out the halberd piece by piece in Kirby Superstar, only very, very truncated. However, the boss that's just 2 big piles of goop can eat a pile of whatever genitals it finds the least appealing. It's just the portion of the Yellow Devil boss fight where he's transferring from one side of the arena to the other, extended ad nauseum. The only way to do this boss fight is to painstakingly memorize every single movement that this boss does. I died and died and died just from attrition alone. But all matter in the universe eventually succumbs to entropy, and all Mega Man games eventually eventually succumb to ending the exact same way as the rest of the series. As per usual, we're subjected to another recycled attrition rush because apparently 20 years into the series' lifespan, tradition is still looked upon more favorably than common sense and an understanding of what's fun as opposed to tedious, boring, and overdone. Then after that, take a guess. Just take a fucking guess what the final boss is. If you guessed one part with Wily in a giant mech followed by Wily in a capsule shooting things at you, you'd be correct. You want to know what's funny? I literally wrote that before going back to review the footage of the boss fight because I just knew before having to remind myself that this is how the final boss will go because it's how every final boss in the classic series has been for at least 6 games now. This time, the most interesting thing they do with the formula is force you to play a glorified game of volleyball with the mech. Then after that, it's as paint by numbers as it comes. Shoot the jaw of the mech, then fight the Wily capsule while he fires shit at you. Boy, these shots sure are hard to dodge. If only I had a move that allowed me to quickly dodge out of the way. Okay, I've beaten that dead horse enough. In the end, for some reason, Mega Man gives Wily a rush slideshow of all the times that Mega Man beat Wily. And it takes for fucking ever. Willfully ignoring the fact that 3 of those victories had different art styles because as far as Capcom was concerned, the series was always 8-bit. Wank, wank, wank. This serves no purpose other than reminding us that the rest of the series happened, like a half-hearted tribute, because it doesn't play into what happens next, which is the single stupidest thing that Mega Man has ever done. I could think of several more offensive ways to describe those actions, but I'm not allowed to use those words anymore. It seems that Dr. Light is captured by Wily, but he's straight up told that it's a fake that was used to frame Dr. Light, but still decides to try and save the decoy Dr. Light and allows Wily to escape, while Proto Man does nothing to help. What the hell was that supposed to be? Well, yet another non-ending to add to the pile. Surprise fucking surprise. Wily gets away to evil another day.
And that was Mega Man Do I Like This Game? 9. That sounded better in my head.
You know, contrary to what a lot of people will say, I didn't want to hate this game. I was willing to put up with the regression and the mechanics and graphics if it were a means to an end, if that was in an effort to make this a great game. Not only did I not want to hate this game, I went into it wanting to like it. I was told by a trusted colleague that Mega Man 9 was terrible, so I did not want to hate this game. I went into it wanting and trying to like it, even being uncharacteristically positive, but through the terrible design resulting in unfair death after unfair death after unfair death, my enthusiasm melted and made way for burning hatred. I hate Mega Man 9 because it's just so fundamentally poorly designed. All these gameplay issues all come down to one thing. Mega Man 9 feels like it's trying to be like something else, but it doesn't understand the subtleties. The entire game feels like it was made from people asking how the old games did it rather than asking themselves how to make Mega Man 9 good, but even then, I think it's a misconception to say that old games were even that hard in their design. Compared to other games of the time, the NES games were totally fair, so in trying to replicate that, they've successfully made, without a doubt, one of the most irritating games I've ever played. It was the popular opinion at the time that Mega Man 2 was the best in the series because the only people old enough to be influencers in video game culture were the people who grew up with the early Mega Man games and had a set idea of what these games should have been. Furthermore, there was nobody around to counteract their opinions because anybody who could have grown up with the other Mega Man games and rightfully say that the later games escalated the series 100 times over weren't old enough to make videos on the topic, or at least convincing videos, so it became commonplace, even Pavlovian, to consider the early Mega Man series the peak. But nostalgia lies and poor design doesn't. Mega Man 9 is not good, and therefore I have no choice but to give this game an F rank. And you know, I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and even though I really hate Mega Man 8, even though it was the only classic Mega Man game I was not able to beat, I honestly think that Mega Man 9 is actually worse, because, you know, looking back at Mega Man 8, it was just dripping with terrible design, but it had something, you know, it tried. Mega Man 8 actually tried to be a good game, and just absolutely failed. But I don't think it failed out of malice, I think it failed out of just sheer ineptitude, whereas Mega Man 9, it completely fails in every single way it possibly could, and doesn't even try at the same time. It's borderline, no, it's not borderline, it is insulting. Mega Man 9 is insulting. You know, there are redeemable things about Mega Man 8. You know, it's easily the best looking Mega Man game in the entire series, at least in the entire classic series, whereas Mega Man 9 is not only a terribly designed and just all-round atrocious game, it's also regressive in every possible way it could have been. It's just not well designed, and also incredibly insulting. It's just terrible. Mega Man 9 just doesn't seem like it wants to try. It doesn't seem like it wants to do anything new. It seems like it's comfortable just doing the bare minimum of effort and then just declaring itself good because this is apparently exactly what its target demographic wanted. It's lazy on top of being bad, whereas Mega Man 8 actually tried and had redeemable quality. You know, bless its heart, it wasn't lazy, and I was never able to beat it. Like, I'm able to beat Mega Man 9, but I also consider it a much more unpleasant experience than Mega Man 8. So yeah, Mega Man 9 is, in fact, the absolute bottom of the barrel, worst classic Mega Man. I may have made it sound like Mega Man 8 was that for me, but also, you know, when I look back, it was incredibly frustrating, but there was something there. It tried. It could have been good. Whereas I don't envision any scenario, any reality where Mega Man 9 could have been good. It's just, it was a bad idea and poorly designed from the ground up, and it just kept piling on flaw after flaw after flaw. Anyways, I'm rambling on. I should probably just wrap this up. I don't know, maybe playing as Proto Man will change things. Hold up. Are you telling me that they put all the old moves in this game, but made them exclusive to another character who takes double damage? Fuck this game!
So, yeah, Mega Man 9 sucks. Worst in the series by a wide margin. Though you may be wondering, what am I doing in here? Well, you see, I supplanted myself in the game so I can do this.
This video was brought to you in part by my lovely patrons. I thank you for your continued support. If you want to become a patron for TGX, the link is in the description. Oh shit, I forgot to talk about the mimics, you know, those enemies that look exactly like regular items. Like, at this point, complaining about that is like complaining about the moist towelettes on a crashing airplane, but man, is that a really cheap trick and just such a dick move. Whatever. I give up.